All right. Well, welcome back to Builders, Makers, Doers. I'm Andy Bassett. He's Elliot Bassett. We're here today with an incredible guest, I believe, Haden Polseno-Hensley with Red Rooster Roasters or Red Rooster Coffee out of Floyd, Virginia. Today, we're going to talk about a journey from the construction industry, from the park services in Alaska to now roasting coffee. So
let's build off that. Well, welcome to the show, Haden. Thanks for joining us. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we spent a little time getting to know you beforehand, and you definitely have an interesting story of how you got into roasting coffee, which I'm excited to bring to everybody. But before we jump into history, let's just tell us a little bit about Red Rooster and what you guys are doing today. A little bit about the business, and then we'll kind of jump into how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, sure. So we're located in Floyd, Virginia, which is in southwestern Virginia, and we roast specialty coffee. So that means we roast like really high end. We like to say that we roast the top 1% of quality of coffee in the world. And that means buying coffee directly from producers and through small importers that have relationships with producers around the world. And we sell that coffee in, some grocery stores like Whole Foods and Fresh Market and things like that. But we also have a very vital direct-to-consumer business where we sell it through our website. And then we have a small cafe here in our town of Floyd as well, where we serve our customers, our local customers, but also a lot of people come through here looking for us. Cool. So right now we roast around 350 to 400,000 pounds of coffee a year.
Jeez.
And
sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. If you knew the numbers of what bigger companies roast, it would not seem like a lot. Because we're very craft, we're very specialty and very niche, and we're a high end craft product.
Well, and for those that don't know Floyd, Virginia, according to your About Us page on the site, 432 people in the metropolis, roughly.
Well, it's a one stoplight town, and I think there's about 450 people in the town, depending on what house is up for sale or who passed away. But there's 15,500 in the county. Okay. But it's a very rural county. It's an agricultural community, one of the bigger geographic footprint counties in Virginia. So, it's pretty spread out. I think at one point we had the most gravel roads of any county in Virginia.
All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, something to be proud of. Well, as Elliot said, we had a chance to chat a little bit before this, and I think for the audience, I think it'd be awesome if you shared, briefly or Cliff's Notes version of kind of your background, because I know I mentioned it in the intro, coming from construction, coming from the park service in Alaska to being in the coffee business. And I think a lot of people, they have interesting and unique journeys as to how they get into whatever business they're in today. But you definitely had a pivot along the way. So maybe just share with the audience a little bit of that history and maybe the why behind you ended up to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I think back on it, it sort of like feels like a pinball machine. I just sort of bounced around in a lot of different ways, trying to find what was right for me. I went to college and was an English major, and had aspirations of being a novelist. And then moved out west after a year in New York City. I moved out west to Wyoming, to Jackson, Wyoming, and I worked for Grand Teton National Park. And, had the time of my life out there. It was an incredible experience. And kind of did everything. I kind of worked my way up to being kind of like what they call a resource ranger, which is like a Swiss Army knife kind of person who takes care of trails or fights fires or takes care of the campgrounds or like fixes things that are broken. And then I remember a conversation with my dad where I was like, well, maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do this. And he was like, well, what are you going to do? Maybe it's about time to make some decisions. And so I went to graduate school. I moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and went to graduate school in creative writing and English literature. And that was really fun, a really amazing experience. Obviously, I was living in Alaska, and just, it's incredible there. But in order to put myself through school, I started working construction. Luckily, I've just learned a lot of skills along the way from my father, actually, who was a potter. Both of my parents are ceramicists. I'm actually drinking out of one of my dad's mugs right here.
Yeah, that's cool.
But they work for themselves. They work from home, and that was sort of like, for me, that was the big takeaway from my parents growing up, is that like they lived the life that they wanted to live because they worked for themselves. Yeah. And my dad did everything around the house. He fixed everything. He built everything, and he was at the house doing that all the time. And so through that, I just picked up a lot of skills from him and was able to kind of slot into working construction really easily. And once I got out of school, I came back home. I've been gone for like 12 years and came back home to see my folks and got a job working construction. Yeah. And was kind of like about to take over the company from my boss, but I saw that he was like kind of extending his period before he was going to retire. And I loved working for him. I learned so much from him. But I met my wife, and well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I re-met my wife because my wife and I were actually high school sweethearts.
Oh, wow.
And we reconnected, and she was running a small coffee shop above her mom's bookstore in downtown Floyd. And at one point, she kind of made this offhanded comment like, what if we roasted our own coffee? Because she wasn't happy with the quality. And also, it's a weird thing. In a town of 450 people, all of a sudden there were 3 coffee shops. And she was like, how are we going to distinguish ourselves, differentiate ourselves from anyone else? And, I had kind of been seeing the writing on the wall that I wasn't going to be in that job forever, but also had like a really rough winter where we were like building this Ipe deck with like this hard, tropical wood, and it was like 0 degrees for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, coffee roasting sounds cool. What's that about? And that's sort of how it started.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's a fun story. We love to get the background of how, folks either got into their business or started their business. And I really want to I love getting into your mind and what you were thinking when you decided to go from construction to roasting coffee beans, which, doesn't sound like you got a degree in or anything. And so,
I don't think they offer one.
Yeah. So, take us back to this. So your wife, makes this comment and you guys are talking about it. How'd you get to the point of taking the leap and making the jump and really, starting a brand new business, which is stressful and there's unknowns, but walk us through your thought process when you were there.
Yeah, well, there's this sort of like practical logistical side, and then there's sort of the dreamer side, right? And so like on the logistics side, we had some really close high school friends who are also married, who she has a background in business and he is a woodworker, and we approached them and said like, do you want to do this together? And he and I completely renovated the space, and her father put up $25,000 in a bond basically so that we could get a loan. And we bought a coffee roaster and renovated this little spot in the back of my mother-in-law's bookstore. And, without them, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
So, and they moved to Atlanta, and, they got out of the business, and, they're still our best friends today. But that was sort of like the practical logistical side of like, how are we actually going to do this? The sort of like dream side really was that once I started thinking about it and started reading about it, I spent a lot of my life up to that point, like in college, reading books and thinking, and just sort of like being an academic. And so the academic side of me just sort of like dove into what coffee meant, what coffee was, what it meant to like produce a high quality coffee. And that just sort of stimulated, the passion and the energy to like really figure it out and say like, well, anyone can roast coffee. You put the coffee in the machine and then it comes out when it's brown. Like,
I think
a lot of people do it like that. And so the question of like, how are we going to do this and actually do it like at a really high level, and then dare to dream that we would do it at such a level that we would be recognized nationally for our quality. And like, I had that dream from very early on. Like that was how we started. I thought, yeah, we're going to sell it at our farmer's market. Yeah, we're going to sell it at some local grocery stores. And yeah, we'll sell it in the cafe. But early on, I said to myself, like, what could we do? How can we do this in such a way that like it really becomes something significant?
Give
Wow,
yourself permission to dream.
Yeah, well, I love that language, dream, and the idea of dreaming. And so, what's the time frame here? Like, how long ago would that have been?
That's 2010. We opened our doors in May of 2010.
Yeah, so 15, 16 years ago, you had this dream. Today, you are where you are. Is there a moment you could tie to where, I guess, say the dream became a reality, or where you're like, wow, this thing is actually happening. This dream is coming to fruition. Because you just mentioned, I imagine it's a pretty competitive space. You said anybody could roast coffee, but you had this dream to be unique, to build a national presence, to be top 1%, to create a product and quality that is somewhat unmatched. Was there a moment when you're like, holy moly, the dream is becoming a reality? Or did it just kind of progress over time?
I think both. I mean, Rose, my wife, and I talk all the time about how like all of our sort of moments where we think we're crossing over into something new actually just are a slow progression forward. It's like nothing happens overnight, right? Yeah. But we had a couple of moments in sometime around the 5 to 7 year mark along that time where all of a sudden we were like, okay, I think people are responding to what we're doing. We had a collaboration with a brewery out of Charlottesville called Star Hill, where we provided the coffee for them to make a beer with, the Star Hill. They called it the Little Red Rooster Stout.
I like that.
It was a really good beer, like maybe the best beer that they had ever produced, in my opinion. And it did really well. And we created a coffee that we made a bag of that coffee blend. And that got us entry into Whole Foods. So that was the first time we were in Whole Foods. And a bunch of other markets. I think that was the first time we were in the fresh market as well. And that all of a sudden, sales took a really big bump. Like people were starting to recognize us, not just locally, but regionally, all the way up to Washington, D.C. So that was a big deal. And then we had a really nice sort of period of time where all of a sudden we realized that our quality was where we wanted it to be and what we thought it was as well. In 2017, we won Good Food Awards for the first time. And, you know, our head roaster and myself kind of looked at each other like, I think we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
think it's happening, you know?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that, you know, we also started a submit coffee to this, it's sort of like the coffee equivalent of Wine Spectator. It's called Coffee Review. And it's run by this longtime coffee professional named Kenneth Davids, who is sort of like the standard bearer for coffee education, and has written a lot of books. And, you know, obviously it's like a pay-to-play site where you have to pay for the reviews, but we started getting reviews back where we were like, okay, I think I understand this. And it actually really helped us measure our quality and helped us build on our quality. And then we got, you know, sort of started getting listed in their like top 30 coffees of the year lists, and saw that change. And yeah, then we just started answering more and more phone calls of people who wanted to use our coffee in their restaurant or their cafe or their hotel, and it just kind of snowballed.
That's amazing.
From there.
Oh, that's the spot you want to get to, right? But I think the interesting thing, and I know Elliot's got questions he wants to ask, but the interesting thing in all of that is when you said it wasn't 5 or 7 weeks or 5 or 7 months. You know, that was 5 or 7 years of
the 5 to 7 year overnight success story.
Yeah. You know, so I think for a lot of people
Yeah.
who listen to this, you have to realize like it takes time, energy, investment into businesses to get to ultimately see the dream kind of become a reality. And so obviously commend you for that for sure. But awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
I think that's great. I mean, kind of on that note, that's what the outside world always sees, right? Is a successful business. And it's like, oh, that, you know, it's an overnight success. And, you know, you started to get the traction one day and all of a sudden you're in the magazines and whatnot and getting the awards. But we all know when you're in the trenches as a business owner, that's not usually how it goes. So, you know, talk through some of that, the challenges associated when you guys were growing the business and trying to break through, and you've got this dream and you know where your quality is and you know what you can do, but you know, it takes a lot of work to get there and to get where you're at today. But go back to some of those times when you had some of those challenges that, you know, people may not always think about when they're looking from the outside in.
Oh man, I mean, how long do you have?
That's what we always go through.
Well, I mean, I think our first challenge is that we're, you know, rural business. So like we don't have a steady stream of people coming to our retail, you know, to our cafe. I mean, we have a very steady, nice business for the size of the town that we are, and I think we're a local institution. But it took a long time to get to that point. And so when you're trying to make a name for yourself on the regional or national level, like I think it is challenging when you're coming from small rural town, you know, to really get the notice. And also, I mean, maybe we're just sort of like less sophisticated. You know, I think sometimes like we were like 2 years early on really capitalizing on social media or understanding it. Like sometimes I think like in today's environment, you could launch a business and plow a certain amount of budget into just like pretending to be a business until you are one, you know? Yep. And we did it the opposite way, where we weren't really sure that we wanted to tell everybody like, hey, we're the best, because we actually did want to be the best. And so we wanted to make sure that we were the best before we went and told people like, we think we're great.
Yeah.
So there's that, you know, and I just think that we've always taken the attitude that we want to be mission driven and mission first. And, that's not like always the most profitable path forward.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of, you kind of put the cart before the horse sometime, because like you want to be mission driven, you want to fulfill your mission, but actually sometimes you need money in order to do that.
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
So you end up like spinning yourself in circles with those challenges. But I think, for us, it's like manufacturing space was like an obvious challenge. That was just like a physical, real challenge in which we started in 184 square foot space. 184 square feet.
Yeah, that's not a
We designed, me and my woodworker buddy designed these carts. I mean, I'm saying I'm giving myself a lot of credit there. That rolled out. They had cabinet front facing facades that looked like cabinets, but they were actually carts, and you rolled out and they held a bag of coffee. Bag of green coffee is like 132 pounds, typically. And so we could hold 7 bags of coffee in our little 184 square foot space. And we had a 6-pound coffee roaster, which was electric, which you just like, there's not very many electric coffee roasters out there that are drum roast coffee roasters. So very quickly we outgrew that space. I think within like 18 months, and within 2 years we hired our first employee, Tony, who's still our head roaster and director of coffee today. So he's going on 14 years.
Wow.
And then we had to rent a space across the parking lot. By the time we moved into the building that we're in now, we had rented 4 spaces, and I was using the office of the nonprofit that I was on the board of. I was using their office as my office when no one was in there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because we had like the packaging department, we had the roasting department, and then we had like a lab and like quality control thing, all in different suites in this building. We're like, well, I think we're paying enough in rent now that we might actually be able to afford to buy a place. And that was in 2017 when we finally moved into this building and renovated it into a coffee manufacturing spot.
No, that's wild. It's funny just to hear how businesses like how you make it work.
Yeah.
Right. So interestingly enough, a lot of times when this question gets asked, one of the most common things we hear when we talk about challenges is people, finding people, getting people. You're in a town of 400 and some people, but you didn't mention that. Have you maybe walked through like what? Because I know some of the cool things we'll talk about that you guys are doing as a company culturally and for the employees and for the community. But maybe the question is, has attracting and retaining talent ever been a challenge for the company in a community, a rural area, or have you kind of mastered that, or where do you feel that there hasn't been a journey as well, like everything else?
I mean, it's always a journey, but I think it's actually the challenges have come more recently, later. Early on, I think small craft companies like ours, where like the thing that you do takes a lot of education and takes a lot of focus, and those type of companies, our type of companies, are lucky to that they are sort of like world opening for people. That like I could probably in this podcast tell you a lot about coffee that you don't know.
Oh yeah.
Because what you see in like daily consumption is just barely scrapes the surface of everything that really goes into coffee, and especially specialty coffee. So Tony, who was our first employee, was working at a small specialty coffee shop and starting to understand coffee and starting to, really get deep into coffee, which is why he wanted to come work for us. And that passion just gripped him, and it's never let go. I mean, he has passion for other things. He's a really avid cyclist and amazing photographer, but the coffee passion has never stopped for him. And soon after that, his wife joined us and started working for us as our second employee.
There you go.
And she started basically as our office manager, kind of do everything, Gal Friday, I guess. And today she's the head of our marketing department. And along the way, my wife had been running this coffee shop, but at the same time, she was the director of a youth actors cooperative. So she ran a children's theater cooperative. And she's a really dynamic personality, and the people that were the actors, the kids there, ended up coming to work for the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And they were totally sold on it too. Like, they were already in with my wife and then came in and started learning about coffee. And they became like incredible baristas, like super high level, highly trained baristas, because we said that's what we're going to do. We're going to figure it out. We're going to do an amazing job. And so really, like, for the first, I would say, 7 to 8 years that we were in business, we were just like tight knit group of people who were like, we're in. We're going to figure everything there is about coffee. We're super passionate about it. We support each other, and we're in, Now what happens then is, like, people get older, people grow up, people move away, and that core group started to sort of like fall away in a certain way. Now, I mean, the woman who runs our cafe has worked for us since she was 15 years old. She's the managing partner in the cafe, and she owns 10% of the cafe today. So, like, not everybody left.
Yeah.
But also then we grew and we needed more people. And the people that come in later are not like part of that core group, right? Nope. They're coming in and they have no experience with it. It doesn't matter if you're like back in the day.
Yeah.
They don't care. So you have to continue to like feed the culture and figure out like what are people passionate about, what people want out of their life, or at least their work life, and try and continue to do that on a daily basis. Even when like you're 16 years in, it's hard to be like, really, we're bootstrapping this thing and it doesn't matter, money doesn't matter, we're just trying to figure it out and we're passionate about it. That's the time for the early days.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people listen to this and be like, man, I don't have a business that I can get as passionate around as a craft like making and roasting coffee, because everybody can relate to coffee.
Yeah.
But I think for people
Probably
listening, like, yeah, right. No kidding. I think for people listening though, it is, how do you get behind that passion? Not only early on, like you said, but as time goes and, things change and the founders or the original kind of core group of people, shifts or whatever. I think it's always trying to figure that out. And so I think there's a lot of, great words of wisdom you just shared there. So thanks for that.
Yeah. And I want to highlight a couple of things that we thought were interesting in our conversation with you beforehand. Is you do some unique things for your employees and your team. Walk us through kind of how you look at, I don't want to say benefits, but just what you're doing for your team to create an environment that, they create some of that passion around, whether it's passion for coffee or just passion for the business and the people that they're working with, and how you're giving back a little bit or just making their lives a little easier. Walk us through some of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that we're always trying to think about what are their needs. I mean, I think it's needs based, right? Like,
it's a great way to look at it.
And so obviously, I mean, everybody needs money, and that's a clear one.
That's kind of got to be there,
yeah.
But right.
At the same time, like, people want to feel fulfilled with their work and feel like they're doing something meaningful. I think that's really important. And I think that the amount of education that we try and put into our employees is really key. So we definitely do a lot of work to make sure that everybody who comes in gets a coffee education. They get to take classes with our head of education here, and they really get to start to understand the industry and what we're doing, and that helps certainly. You know, one of the main things that we're really known for, and I've sort of become a sort of accidental poster child for employee owned childcare, is that we started our own on-site childcare facility in 2018. Really? When my wife was pregnant with our second child, and several employees, several of the people that I mentioned, were pregnant or about to have a baby or had a small child. And, you know, the sort of backstory of that is basically that we were kind of under the table, had created like a little babysitting ring, you know, and we were doing it out of my sister-in-law's house. And then there was just like too many kids in there, and we bought this building, and then we brought the people in, and we were paying cash. And then like other parents were paying, but Red Rooster was sort of paying the most of it. But I think my wife and I were really just like paying the most of it. and then we were like, oh wait, this is a factory.
Yeah.
We can have like a black market babysitting ring in a factory when the building inspector and the fire marshal show up, or the FDA. And so we formalized it and got really lucky. We found a director like right away who had experience with the Department of Social Services licensing a childcare facility, and was like, yeah, I can do that for you, and I'll be the director. And so we did. And we've been running an on-site childcare facility since 2018, so almost 8 years now. It's changed over time because I can't know if you can tell from my beard, but I'm a little bit older, and me and a lot of the other people around here are not having kids anymore.
Yeah.
And so we've evolved, and so part of the way that we've evolved is that the hours are different now. All the kids are at school, and they come for aftercare, and they come on Fridays when a lot of kids don't have school, because there's a private school here that's close by that a lot of our kids attend. And then holidays like school closures and weather related. I mean, the past 2 weeks we've been full time because school has been closed. But along those lines, you know, the evolution of how we want to serve our employees has changed. To think, well, we serve them in this way. Families who need extra support, we serve them through the childcare facility. But now that their kids are in school, they have different needs. They're like, they need to go to take, you know, lessons, you know, piano lessons, or they have a soccer league, a travel soccer league that costs money, or they have added childcare, you know, childcare costs in any sort of form. And so we actually just recently launched a family care plan, which is a fund that we put money into, and then our employees can come and get reimbursed for childcare expenses, basically. Yeah. And then if you don't want to do that, or if you want to split it out, we also are doing an employer-funded 529, you know, college savings plan. So you can choose where to put that money, and we'll invest it for you in a 529, which, you know, obviously the employee can put money into as well. Yep. And or we'll reimburse you on childcare expenses. So, you know, it's just that we've been looking at it as an evolution of how can we serve. I mean, you know, we add a 401k when we were big enough and solvent enough to do that. So we do a matching 401k for our employees. We you know, we were pretty early adopters on, I don't know if you could see my text messages on my screen. No. Okay. My wife is reminding me to get groceries.
The important stuff, by the way.
Yeah. Don't forget. But in any case, you know, we started covering healthcare premiums that are pretty early on in the life of the company. Just as I said, it's, working backwards from the mission and the values of trying to take care of people.
I think that maybe for me, when I hear that, one of the coolest things I think about when I hear that, because it's the same thing we're doing in our business outside of this podcast, is that when you're a small, privately held business and you see needs, and you just said it, you saw a need and you started with a babysitting service essentially, and you formalized it over time. Yeah, right. But that's the beauty of what small business in America can do. They can see a need, they can act quickly, they can implement and iterate, right, to make sure we're in compliance or all the other things. And then you mentioned your business, like anything, the people in the business, there's phases to it. And so as that need sort of phased out, you pivoted and you created an environment where it became the after school or whatever. And so I think like so many people should be able to listen to that and say, that's what's cool. That's what's amazing. That's what's special about having a small business, because big business, it's hard.
Yep.
A lot of red tape, a lot of decision making, moves slow to be able to do those kind of things. So like when I see and hear you talk about that, that's exactly what comes to mind to me. Is there's a lot of challenges and grinds of being small business owners, but there's massive rewards. And what you just described, in my opinion, is one of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that when I think back on it, it was just a problem that needed solving. And so,
exactly.
Today, outside of this, like I recently testified at a congressional subcommittee about workforce and childcare. I was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and sat in front of House of Representatives members and talked about this. And of course, things like tax deductions and like law like 45F is a new. It's an ongoing, constantly being edited law that allows for tax deductions for people who are investing in childcare. But in 2018, when our business was still kind of bootstrapping because we had just bought this building, we weren't thinking about how can we go get tax advantage from this. We were thinking, here's a problem, let's go solve it, which is basically how we address every single thing that we do in our business. Is like, what's the problem? Let's fix it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, so do I. Excuse me. And it's so impactful when it goes to your team too. I love how you looked at it. It was just a need that our team had, and we realized we could solve it. And not only does that solve the need, but it creates a great culture. There's, all the other extenuating, circumstances and whatnot that drives. But I think it comes back to, or it feels like it's kind of your worldview of just how you look at business, and you're mission driven. You've mentioned a few times. And I think when you have that perspective, it's a lot easier to look for those things that say, we're not all about driving profit. We're not all about, growing to be the biggest company we can be. We're about taking care of our people, and we're going to look for those opportunities where we can help. And we're in a unique position to be able to do that. To Andy's point, I think when you're a small growing business, you have the ability to do some of that. You don't always have the resources, but you can look at things uniquely, is maybe how I'd put it. So I think that's fantastic. Before we wrap up, we always like to just ask, is there, you've been growing this business for 15, 16 years, and a lot of the people listening are people either getting into a business or a business owner. Is there anything that sticks out to you from the last decade and a half that you'd like to remind somebody that's in those shoes and trying to grow a business from your experience?
Yeah, probably a lot. That's a good question. I think that today I would probably go a little bit slower. And that's to say that I would be more pragmatic in my choices, even in the sort of opportunities that I said yes to. I was young and I was hungry, and I said yes to everything.
Yep.
And I would say that I ended up working a lot harder than I needed to, because maybe not having a business background, I felt like I was getting a lesson. I was basically, getting an education as I did it. And the education that I received was essentially like, slow down, be more pragmatic, have pride in your work and in pride in what you do, and be able to make the choices that really best benefit you, your company, and, frankly, your family and your time, which you can't get back. And I think that there is a time and a place for being young and hungry and invested and working as much as you can towards your dreams. But you also have to value yourself and value the work that you're doing. And if you're doing an exceptional job at what you do, then people will find you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know how we can close it any better.
I don't either, because that was very well said and incredibly interesting stuff. Maybe just one quick last question, because it's hard to not want to close on that. But is there anything looking forward for the company that is different, unique, exciting, or is it just kind of mission forward, or anything that's worth sharing with the audience about Red Rooster that maybe we can look forward into the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really excited about a project that I'm building, but it's really in its nascency. Like it's still gestating. I haven't given birth to it. Just a riff on the childcare theme.
Love it.
But our focus in the way that we source green coffee is to source as much coffee as we can from producers that we know, or producers that we work with for a long time, or people who are, friends of ours, or people who are producing extremely high quality product and also doing good work in the country of origin. And trying to piece that together as a small business about how are you buying the coffee? Who are you buying it through? How are you orchestrating the contracts? And how do you really know what's happening at origin if you can't spend a lot of time there? Means that you sort of end up putting it together part and parcel. And so a lot, if you look at sort of coffee businesses, you end up seeing a lot of the same coffees being sold in a lot of the same places. Because it's just what's accessible, right? And I am really interested in a model in which we can take producers out of what is essentially a bad debt cycle. Because a lot of small to medium producers, and even some large producers, have to borrow money every year for production. And so they borrow money from banks that are specifically there to loan to coffee production in a lot of cases, in those regions. Or if they're not specifically for that, a big part of their business is doing that. And they'll be loaning sometimes at 20%. I mean, big interest rates, but just for a year, right? And so you borrow money, you hire labor, you pick the coffee, you process the coffee, you sell the coffee. The market dictates whether or not you make money, because the commodities market is constantly shifting. And if you catch it at the right time, you'll make money. But also your production volume, is also going to dictate. Maybe you have a drought year, maybe you have a frost, maybe you have disease or fungus, and your production is low. And then you borrowed X amount of money, you spent X amount of money, but then you sold the coffee and you didn't make as much as you thought, and you still have to pay the bank back.
Oh.
So you can get caught in a debt cycle. And even with high coffee prices, which right now the commodities market is pretty high, as high as it's ever been, really, that kind of problem really persists. So anyway, that's a very sort of long preamble to say that, you know, I'm really interested in building out a new system in which we are going to be able to prepay for coffee in at least some small lots. I mean, we're small, so we can't have like make a huge difference right away. But for small producers to be able to take a deposit or take a lump sum at no interest and just be able to give the coffee back to us at maybe a slight discount or even at just like a market rate without having to pay the huge financial burden of like taking out a loan means that we can help that producer, you know, confidently produce for the next season, and then we can buy more, and then we can buy more. And so it's going to start small, and it's just going to be into some individual producers, and then just try to build on that. And I'm basically trying to build a software solution to make that happen.
Well, so what I'm hearing is if that comes to fruition, Cam, I think we need to get you back on and learn about how that played out, because that's really cool. Well, I know, Elliot, we're probably getting close to end of time.
Yeah.
I'll let you.
Yeah, no, we just really appreciate the time. Haden, this has been a really fun conversation for us, and I'm sure everybody listening. You know, it's just fun to hear business owners and folks like yourself, entrepreneurs that have a unique story, and that, you know, you don't always think, you know, when you're in it, doing it, it's just your day to day. And it's just like, you know, building Red Rooster. But I think everybody looking, you have a really cool story. And so kudos to what you guys are doing. And to Andy's point, we look forward to the future, and would love to have you back on in a year or two and see where you're at. So
cool. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story a little bit, you know. It's always good.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.